Welcome back to How to Be a Better DM, the official podcast of Monsters.rent. I'm Justin Lewis.
And I'm Tanner Weyland.
And we are here to help you tell better stories for yourself and your players as you dungeon master sessions of D&D, Dungeons & Dragons. We'd like to give you some quick announcements. We actually have one before the show, and then after the show, if you want to stick around, we have some more announcements then as well. But first, let's talk about this. Tired of being alone? Are you tired of not having any of your players understand you? Are you tired of never truly belonging? Well, you're in luck. All you need to do is join the Guild. The Guild is a unique and exclusive experience that is only open to Dungeon Masters. It is a full community focused on helping ease your DMing burdens. Want to meet other DMs? Join the Guild. Want to discuss your homebrew ideas with people who would appreciate it instead of just telling your cat? Join the Guild. Want to find a place where all your wildest dreams will come true? Join the Guild. Go to monsters.rent/guild and sign up today for free. Wait, that can't be right. Chuck, can you check this again? Is this supposed to be... What? Oh, they're serious? It's free? Oh, okay. All right. Yes, go to monsters.rent/guild and sign up today for free, even though they are crazy for giving this away for free. Common side effects may include burping, sneezing, laughing, breathing, hearing, listening, tasting, farting, critting, sarcasm, and in extreme cases, explosive diarrhea. Awesome. With that out of the way, we can get into today's show.
Hello and welcome to How to Be a Better DM. My name is Tanner Weyland, and together we're going to learn about how to make great adventures for our players. Today we're going to jump right in. We do have, as I mentioned, and I'm going to mention this briefly before I jump into our topic, we do have a one-shot happening in a couple weeks. Those slots are filled up, but we're doing these more consistently now. We'll be doing a monthly for the most part, and you can see on our website, and I'll even have the link in the show description, but you can sign up there. We'd love to have you. We always love playing with our listeners. It's always such a fun time. Okay, now I can get to the meat, to the good stuff. And today it's about one-shots, specifically how to make D&D one-shots with impact. What do I mean? So a lot of times you'll probably notice this during, a longer campaign. There's specific moments that are really fun. There's some moments that are really, deep and provocative. And then there's other moments that are just so-so, right? The problem with one-shots is you don't have a whole campaign and multiple sessions and multiple times together with players to, make a juicy experience, right? So that's the hard thing with one-shots. They're kind of like short stories as compared to novels, where like a novel doesn't always need to be just 5 stars, right? They've got some downtime, they've got some exposition, they have different parts that aren't really moving you, but they're kind of ramping up, right? A short story, you don't get that luxury. Everything kind of has to be fine-tuned and perfected so that every part of it is just impactful and meaningful and really hits you. And that's kind of what you're trying to do with one-shots as well. You don't have the buildup. You don't get to have just average parts. I mean, you can, right? But the hope is that your players have kind of the range of emotions that, they would have during a campaign, but within one singular one-shot. And that's pretty hard, frankly. But, you can do it, and there's a few tips that I have today that can really help you make one-shots with impact. First, I think this is something, it's true of people, and it's true of one-shots. If there isn't a purpose or a clearly defined mission, then a lot of times it can wander. And I think that that's especially true when DMs don't know how to start out a one-shot correctly. And so to start out correctly and to give, kind of that mission statement, quote unquote, what you're going to want to do is provide conflict and weight, as in like make it so that the conflict is kind of a weighty matter that the characters and the players playing them will actually care about. So to do this, there's a couple ways. One, when you're writing the one shot or when you're choosing a one shot, if you choose a pre-written one, you're going to want to choose one that the characters your players are bringing to the table that they would care about, right? For example, there's this one that I've been writing, and I'm actually going to be using it next week, but it's about a wedding. And now, yes, the wedding's with a princess and everything, but the reason why the characters care is because they've been childhood friends with the princess. And that's why they've been, bridesmaids, groomsmen, because they have that close connection with the couple. And of course, it helps that she's a princess and he's a prince and everything, right? Regardless, that kind of storytelling and being like, hey, this has a weighty conflict for the characters involved and they'll want to be involved. That kind of adds some nice motivation, right? Second, you're going to want to be really specific with your intro lines. Sometimes DMs, when it's a longer campaign, they have a nice little intro, but then it's just a lot of, sitting around a tavern, kind of getting to slowly, emphasis on the word slowly, get to know each other as characters, right? You don't have that luxury. You've got to just very quickly have everybody introduce themselves, and then you start in with a pre-written line, right? For another one shot that I've written, it could be something like this. The troops in Riven Pass are outnumbered, freezing, and starving, while defending against the hordes of kobolds. You and your team are the only ones who can help them survive the onslaught. The commander of the slowly moving reinforcements to those troops called you and your team in, handed you a bag of holding with supplies for the troops, and pointed over the mountain pass. We can't wait, he said. Or rather, they can't. You need to make it to that pass with the supplies for all those men, or else they die. Now, I think that you can see how something like that would feel different and also give a lot of immediate purpose over something where you're like, okay, so here's the different players, you're walking through camp. Because I actually thought about this when I was writing the one shot. I had a whole scene where the players are walking through camp, and then the commander of the garrison of these reinforcements actually has to sit down, and he's in a meeting, and they go into the tent and he explains everything. That was fine. It'd be fine maybe even in a lot of one shots, but I realized I was like, you know what? I'm losing a lot of momentum, and momentum's key. Momentum and purpose are key in one shots, because if you don't have that, or rather if your players don't, then you're not going to probably get done, or you're going to have to skip a lot of parts, which you usually have to do anyway. And then, and it's hard for them to feel as invested because they just lost that steam. So that's kind of my first piece of advice to make impactful one shots, is making sure that you have conflict and weight with a WEIGHT. Second, I would say that a good one shot needs variety. Now, there's obviously exceptions, right? I'm sure everyone's heard of a one shot where, the entire thing happens in a coliseum, which, surprise, surprise, is just for fighting. Yeah, you're maybe talking with the leader equivalent, as you bargain for your life as they sit up in the stands, right? But for the most part, it's going to be a gauntlet of enemies, lions, tigers, bears, gladiators, oh my, but even within a setting like that, and especially in a setting that isn't just begging for a continual fight, you're going to want to have a good amount of variety. And this is doubly true if you have new players. You want players to experience everything that a normal campaign has, right? That includes combats, skill checks, traps, which of course falls under skill checks, right? Role-playing and interacting with NPCs and other players, making decisions in terms of what you're going to do. If you can include all of those, then you've won, right? You've created a very well-rounded one-shot. which is always more enjoyable. I have some tips for this. Of course, first off, you've got to look at combats differently. You can't just be like, hey, here's a bunch of stat blocks against my player's stat blocks. Let's, roll some dice. I would really argue that most combats, aside from maybe the combat with the big bad, or maybe not all of the combats, but like only one combat should be like super standard and basic, where it's just, beating down the other side while they're beating you down. For the other combats, you should make it so that, there's a chance that the NPC can be dissuaded, or the NPC and the players are going for the same objective, and whoever gets it, essentially the combat ends, right? Or it could be a case of wanting to have a trap go off in the middle of combat, or have it in an interesting environment. Whatever it is, throwing in these other kinds of curveballs can make it so that, hey, even when you're spending time in combat, your players are having an interesting experience with a lot of variety. And the same can be true for, for more diplomatic role-playing situations, right? You can mix in skill checks. You can make it so that it's a very action-based type of conversation. You could have the players see that the NPC is doing something, or they're guarding something, and then you can kind of have that action where it's a bit of back and forth, but then the players are like, hey, let me help you out. Or, the rogue is like, hey, distract him. I'm going to go around and get through that door that he's guarding, or whatever, right? The point is, you've got to look at things multidimensionally. A combat isn't just a combat when it comes to variety, right? It can also be skill checks and role-playing. And role-playing isn't just role-playing. It can also include skill checks and lead to potential combat. In all cases, you're going to want to keep each of these different sections somewhat short, because it's hard to fit every one of the wonderful aspects in D&D, from combat to role-playing to skill checks. It's hard to fit all of that in one session if you're not being super purposeful, and if you're also not cutting certain things short when you realize they're going too long. Third, and this is more of a nuanced tip, I would say. You still want a satisfying ending, because if you had a great start where you gave purpose to the characters, and also did a very crafted exposition that gives them kind of the scope of the adventure, if you've done that and if you've gotten variety, that's great. But so many things fall flat if you don't end a story correctly. So that's where you can do a few different things. As I've mentioned a few times, one-shots are very hard to get to the end, because to some extent, if you're going to have a satisfying quote-unquote ending, it has to be written by you, or it has to be in the pre-written adventure. But the thing that makes one-shots so unsatisfying sometimes is that DMs get rushed. They essentially lead the players to an unearned ending, right? Where it's like, you don't have time to do more than just like hit the boss a couple times, or discover that the boss or the big bad is the next door neighbor. Oh, you just found it out. Now you have a whole battle in front of you, right? If something like that happens, then it's going to be easy to be like, oh, you find that the neighbor's the person, and the police come and arrest them, and you all live happily ever after. It's not quite as satisfying, and I think players will feel that. And so what you're going to want to do is know the different parts of the one shot and which parts are less important, right? Or which parts are okay to gloss over. Because I'm going to tell you, glossing over, the big end conflict, that kind of, unless it's kind of the appropriate thing based on the player's choices, it can kind of pull the rug out from underneath them. So you're going to want to, if a combat is going long, decrease the enemy's points, right? And then, oh my goodness, they died now instead of 3 turns from now. Or you're going to want to have the enemy run away. For role playing, if you notice that the conversation is going way off base, and not like in a fun way, but in a way that just kind of is tiring out the players and you, then a great thing to do would just be to offer up information, you know, or to force a skill check that, then gets them to move on, and, whether they succeed or fail, and then, that leads to whatever, you're going to want to move things along. Now, in terms of a satisfying end, I would say that you're going to also want to have, the villain and the quest giver's lines somewhat written out. Not fully, right? Because that's really hard because you don't know what the players are going to ask. But at least key parts, right? Like the villain monologue. I think that that's something that can get out of hand. And then the players can do a lot of back and forth with that, which is sometimes fun. But sometimes if you're like, hey, we're down to the wire, I want to get out this villain's monologue so that the players know why they did this. Oh, also, I want to make sure that that the players, get a chance to beat the villain and then hear from, in the one shot I'm running, the princess whose wedding it was. You're going to want to have all of that somewhat prepared so that you don't have to, have just kind of an unsatisfying, like, oh, the princess said thank you, and then you all lived happily ever after. Rather, you could have the princess say, I had no idea that my best friend would try and sabotage my wedding, or something like that, right? And then, maybe even give a little bit of background. And most importantly, for a satisfying ending, I think you really do need to be lavish with the rewards. If this is a one-shot, think about it. Who's going to care if you give, that barbarian an axe that cuts the world in two, right? No one cares. They're not going to play that character again. And also, what you could do is, give away bigger things that you don't actually have to follow up on, right? It could be, this couple in the group, you give them a house and some land, and then they start a family, and you kind of give a montage of their life. Whatever it is, just realize that you're going to want more than just like 2 or 3 minutes for the end. You're going to want enough that you can actually wrap up the story with a nice bow. And that doesn't just start with, planning. That's part of it. But it's also a lot of rolling with the punches, cutting things short when they don't, when they've outlived their usefulness in providing variety and story. Cutting things short and then tying it up with a nice bow by having, good explanation from the villain, the quest giver, and also giving some great rewards to these players. And as a final note, if you're ever like, oh, but what if I give these amazing rewards and then we decide to do a campaign with these characters? You know what? That's fine. Do timed skip, right? Have the couple whose farm that was, they got divorced or something, or maybe they lost the farm in the potato famine of, 32 or something, right? Whatever it is, you can take away those overpowered rewards. I'm just saying, for the purpose of the one shot, considering it as one whole adventure in and of itself, be lavish at the end. Lavish in terms of making the villain more villainous, the quest giver more grateful, and your players give them the happiest ending you can, and then end your story. End it with a nice, and they lived happily ever after. And at that point, it's going to feel like a true happy ever after versus, oh man, we got to hurry. We got to end this. You beat him. Great. Game over. So those were just some different thoughts that I had in regards to one shots. And it's something that I've worried about a lot personally, because, one shots, I've run a lot more campaigns than I have one shots. And I always worry because I'm like, oh, what if it's not good enough? What if it's not interesting enough? And you know what? Just I think as a final note here, it's okay if it's not perfect, right? One shot is just kind of an introductory thing. So long as you are trying to prepare well enough and create, first and foremost, a fun environment for your players, even if the story is not perfect, even if you forget to include a lot of variety, And even if, the conflict isn't all that big, you can still have a fun time and players will want to play with you again, right? Now, if you include those other things, then it's going to make for a better one-shot. But in the end, it's the environment you create that will make players enjoy playing with you. And that's what I want to leave with you. I really hope that you have a wonderful week. I know I will. My sister's getting married this weekend, so kind of a busy weekend, but a happy one for me. So, it's actually funny. I kind of started writing that one shot with the idea of weddings in mind because my sister was getting married. But I think that's one of the fun things about one shots. You can kind of create them based off of specific ideas that are one shot ideas, but are really fun. So go out there, write or get a nice one shot, and have a great time with your players. And until next time, let's roll initiative.
Thank you for listening to today's show. We really appreciate your support and your patronage. We have a few more announcements to go over. First,
did you ever fall in love with the library as a kid? It was a place where you could experience 1,000 stories without having to buy 1,000 books. That is what Monsters.rent can do for your D&D campaign. You can rent and swap out as many quality miniature monsters and creatures for your D&D party as you could ever want, without having to buy them. You can rescue villagers from a kobold camp, or lead your party through the fighting forest, or many more adventures. We're coming out with new bundles all the time. Just sign up for our subscription to get access to your own personal library of minis. Go to monsters.rent to find out more. That's the website. Monsters, with an S, .rent. Get your library pass to a world of minis today.
we also wanted to let you know that today's episode is sponsored by Stardust and Dragons. I'm going to let one of the cast of Stardust and Dragons, Christian Hatcher, and his crew tell you a little bit more about it.
This August, a new adventure podcast is coming to a platform near you, filled with action.
You one of the two of them. We can't keep taking hits like that.
Drama.
Everything that she's been doing, everything she's going to do, finally sets in.
And Stardust.
Help! Help! Someone, please!
Find out more about this epic odyssey at stardustanddragons.com, where adventure awaits in the stars.
That's all the announcements we have today. Again, thank you so much for everything you do for us. You make this show possible. Like we said before, we'll be back next week with another great episode, and until then, let's go ahead and roll initiative.